A manager suddenly becoming quiet can feel harmless at first, but when feedback disappears from every meeting, every message, and every review conversation, the silence can become a warning sign. This is the story of how one employee discovered that the absence of criticism was not approval, but a sign that his role inside the company was changing. The first thing Evan noticed was not a bad review. It was the missing comments. For almost 3 years, his manager, Colin, had a habit of leaving detailed notes on everything Evan touched. A presentation would come back with 10 edits. A project plan would have questions in the margins. Even a short email draft might receive a quick message saying, "Try this angle instead." Evan did not always enjoy the feedback, but he trusted it. He knew where he stood. Then, 6 months before the annual promotion cycle, the comments stopped. A strategy document that usually returned covered in suggestions came back with only one sentence from Colin: "Looks good." A meeting where Evan expected discussion about his team's priorities ended after 5 minutes. When Evan asked, "Anything you want me to adjust before we send this out?" Colin smiled and said, "No, you're good. Keep doing what you're doing." At first, Evan thought he had finally reached a new level of independence. Maybe this was what trust looked like. He had spent years proving himself. He managed difficult clients, helped new employees, and regularly solved problems before leadership noticed them. A manager stepping back could have been a sign that Evan was ready for more responsibility. But one small detail bothered him. Colin was still giving feedback, just not to him. During a project meeting, Evan watched Colin spend 20 minutes reviewing another employee's presentation. He questioned assumptions, suggested changes, and discussed how the work connected to larger company goals. Evan left the meeting wondering why his own work received almost no discussion anymore. The next clue appeared in a calendar invitation. Evan noticed that a quarterly planning meeting he had attended for 2 years no longer included his name. The meeting still involved the same project, the same executives, and the same decisions. He asked Colin about it casually. "Hey, I noticed I'm not on the planning invite anymore. Did the structure change?" Colin paused before answering. "Yeah, we're trying to keep those meetings smaller. You don't need to worry about the details. Just keep execution moving." That answer sounded reasonable. Companies change meetings. Managers adjust responsibilities. Not every change means something negative. But Evan started looking at the pattern. His feedback had decreased. His access to important conversations had decreased. And his work was increasingly being described as execution rather than ownership. That distinction mattered. In many workplaces, employees are judged not only by the quality of their work, but also by their visibility in important decisions. Research from workplace organizations has repeatedly shown that communication, recognition, and access to information influence career growth. The issue is not simply doing valuable work. It is whether the right people understand the value you create. Evan had assumed his results would speak for themselves. The problem was that fewer people were hearing the story behind those results. A few weeks later, the company announced a restructuring of several teams. Nothing dramatic happened immediately. No one was fired. No one received a warning. But Evan noticed something during the transition. A newer employee on another team was now presenting updates on work Evan had helped build. The employee was not stealing anything. In fact, he openly mentioned Evan's contributions. But leadership was becoming more familiar with the person explaining the work than the person who created much of the process behind it. That was the moment Evan understood what the silence meant. Colin was not necessarily trying to push him out. There was no secret plan or obvious conflict. The more likely explanation was simpler. Colin had started seeing Evan as someone who could handle tasks independently, but not as someone who needed to be included in future leadership conversations. The manager's reduced feedback was not because Evan had become invisible in a positive way. It was because their professional relationship had shifted from development to delegation. Evan changed his approach. He stopped waiting for feedback to appear. He started sending short project summaries after major milestones. He asked clearer questions about expectations. Instead of saying, "Is there anything else I should do?" he asked, "What responsibilities would I need to demonstrate to be considered for the next level?" The conversations became different. Not immediately, but gradually. Colin began involving him in more planning discussions because Evan was no longer only reporting completed work. He was showing how he thought about decisions. The last time Evan opened a project document from Colin, the comment section looked different. It was not full of corrections like before. Instead, there was one question at the top. "Can you lead the discussion on this next week?" That single sentence told him more than all the previous feedback combined. Sometimes a manager becoming quieter means they trust you. Sometimes it means they are overwhelmed. And sometimes it means you are no longer part of the conversations where your future is being decided. The important question is not simply, "Why did my manager stop giving feedback?" The better question is, "Where am I still visible? And where have I disappeared?" Have you ever noticed a manager's communication changing before a major career decision? And what was the first sign that made you realize something was different?